Karen calls 911 when Black Man changes his own Wi-Fi password. What happens next is shocking. Jamarcus had poured his heart and soul into securing a home in an upscale neighborhood. He'd scrimped and saved for years, driven by the dream of living somewhere serene and well-maintained. This house was more than just a roof over his head. It represented everything he'd worked for. He cherished the tranquility, the manicured lawns, and the sense of order that came with it. But recently, something peculiar had begun to happen. His Wi-Fi, which was usually lightning fast, was crawling at a snail's pace. At first, Jamarcus assumed it was just the usual overload, maybe too many devices streaming or updating at once. Yet, as the lag persisted, he decided to look into his router settings. That's when he spotted it, an unfamiliar device leeching off his network. Irritated, he changed the password without a second thought, unaware that this single act would trigger a series of events revealing far more than a mere stolen internet connection. The next morning, as Jamarcus sat on his porch savoring a cup of coffee, his neighbor, Karen Whitmore, marched straight onto his property without so much as a knock. She was a middle-aged woman with meticulously styled blonde hair, a haughty glare, and a distinct sense of self-importance. She wasted no time, launching right into a tirade. "Did you change your Wi-Fi password?" she snapped, folding her arms across her chest. Jamarcus blinked in surprise. He had barely exchanged more than a few polite nods with this woman since moving in, yet she acted as if he owed her an explanation. "Yeah, I did," he said, keeping his voice even. "Why?" Karen's face flared red with indignation. "Because my internet stopped working. I've been using that connection for months, and now I can't do anything." Jamarcus stared, stunned by her audacity. She wasn't even making an attempt to conceal what she'd done. "You've been stealing my Wi-Fi?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen scoffed as if the idea of theft didn't apply to her. "It's just the internet. You people always turn everything into a federal case. It's not like it costs you extra." Jamarcus inhaled deeply, willing himself to stay calm. "It's my Wi-Fi and I pay for it. I don't owe you access." That was apparently the last straw for Karen. Her features contorted with outrage. "Oh, I see what's going on," she sneered. "You don't belong in this neighborhood, and now you think you can play games with the people who actually do? I'm calling the police." Jamarcus had no time to protest before Karen whipped out her phone and dialed 911. He listened in disbelief as she concocted a story on the spot. "There's a suspicious man in my neighborhood," she told the operator, injecting a forced quiver into her voice. "He's trying to hack into people's homes. He's harassing me right now, and I feel threatened." Jamarcus exhaled, watching Karen's smug expression, while she lied so effortlessly. She clearly believed she held all the power and could manipulate the system to her advantage. What she didn't know was just how wrong she was. With nothing else to do but wait for the inevitable arrival of the police, Jamarcus went back inside, sat at his desk, and opened his router's connection history. A creeping sense of unease took hold as he examined the data. Initially, it looked like the usual internet use: streaming, shopping, social media. But the more Jamarcus dug, the darker things became. Someone, almost certainly Karen, had visited racist forums, riddled with hateful rhetoric, conspiracies, and incitements to violence. Sites she had spent hours posting on under anonymous handles. Worse yet were the encrypted transactions suggesting fraudulent activities, shady websites, stolen goods, and even the possibility of identity theft. Credit card information was apparently being processed through suspicious marketplaces. Jamarcus leaned back, letting out a low whistle. He'd stumbled upon serious criminal behavior, and it looked like Karen was behind it all, using his network to cover her tracks. His jaw tightened. The final, most chilling discovery came from a login attempt to an illegal website flagged for trafficking explicit material. His stomach turned. This woman was the real threat, yet she had just called the police on him over a simple password change. Sirens announced the officer's arrival moments later. A patrol car pulled up into Jamarcus's driveway. 2 officers stepped out. Officer Jordan, a tall and calm black man, and Officer Miller, a shorter, stockier white man. Their expressions were unreadable as they approached. Karen, still pacing in Jamarcus's yard, sprang into a dramatic performance the moment she saw them. She rushed forward, her face a mix of faux fear and righteous anger. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she cried, voice trembling with counterfeit distress. "That man," she pointed at Jamarcus, "has hacked into my devices. He's stealing personal information from everyone in this neighborhood. I feel unsafe and I need help." Officer Jordan lifted his eyebrows. Ma'am, slow down. Tell us exactly what happened. Karen sucked in an exaggerated breath, milking her moment of victimhood. I was minding my own business at home when my internet died. I realized he must have hacked my network. When I confronted him, he got hostile. He threatened me and refused to fix what he sabotaged. I had no choice but to call you before he does something worse. Officer Miller exchanged glances with Officer Jordan, then looked over at Jamarcus, who remained calm on his porch, arms folded. He certainly didn't appear hostile. If anything, he looked mildly amused. Sir, Officer Jordan said, turning to Jamarcus, would you like to explain your side of things? Jamarcus nodded, gesturing toward Karen. This woman's been stealing my Wi-Fi for months. I changed the password this morning, and when she showed up demanding I give it to her, I refused. So she called you. Officer Jordan's expression remained carefully neutral, but Officer Miller let out a short snort of laughter. Wait, so she called the cops because you changed your own Wi-Fi password? Karen whipped her head around to glare at Miller. It's more complicated than that. He's a hacker, probably doing illegal things online. You need to check his devices before he hurts someone. Officer Jordan pulled out a notepad. Karen, you're saying you have reason to believe Jamarcus has hacked you. Do you have any proof? Karen hesitated. Well, no, but... And you, Jordan continued, turning to Jamarcus, say she's been using your internet without your permission? Jamarcus gave a firm nod. And I can prove it. Jordan and Miller exchanged meaningful looks. Karen's story had more holes than substance, while Jamarcus was offering tangible proof. Jordan nodded toward the front door. Okay, let's see it. Karen's superior smirk vanished for the first time. Apprehension flickered across her face. She'd assumed the police would instantly take her side as they often did, but these officers weren't playing along. Jamarcus led them inside, heading straight to his computer. Karen trailed behind, looking trapped, her earlier bravado clearly waning. Still, she clung to the idea that the situation could flip in her favor at any moment. Jamarcus plugged a USB drive into his computer and opened the saved router logs. I checked my connection history, he explained, clicking through the files. Karen's been logged onto my Wi-Fi for quite some time. And as you can see, she's been visiting some extremely sketchy website. Officer Jordan and Officer Miller leaned in, studying the evidence. Transaction data for fraudulent sites, posts in extremist forums spouting racist vitriol, and, worst of all, links to an illegal website flagged for child exploitation. Officer Miller let out a disbelieving huff. Wow. Karen's face went ghostly white. That's not mine. He's framing me, she shrieked, voice climbing an octave. Jamarcus didn't even turn to look at her. Karen, your IP is right here. You were using my network, so every page you visited, every message you posted, every scam you ran, it's all logged. Officer Jordan crossed his arms over his chest. So let me get this straight. You've been piggybacking on his Wi-Fi without authorization, and now you're saying he somehow planted all this evidence? Karen's jaw worked furiously, words failing her. It's a setup. He's a dangerous hacker, and you have to arrest him. Jamarcus swiveled around in his chair, meeting her panicked glare. You called the cops to get me in trouble. Instead, you brought them right to your own doorstep full of skeletons. Officer Jordan exhaled heavily. Karen, things really aren't looking good for you. Officer Miller nodded, glancing once more at the screen. We'll definitely need to investigate this further. Karen's panic morphed into unhinged desperation. No, this isn't fair. He's the criminal. She suddenly lunged at Jamarcus, swinging her manicured nails toward his face. Before she could land a blow, Officer Miller grabbed her wrist and twisted her arm behind her back. That's assault, he said calmly, controlling her flailing limbs. Karen let out a shrill cry, eyes wild. You can't do this to me. I'm the victim. Officer Jordan spoke into his radio. Dispatch, we have one suspect in custody, requesting additional units for further investigation. Karen's eyes bulged. Suspect? What do you mean, suspect? I'm telling you, he's dangerous. Jamarcus crossed his arms, watching Karen's meltdown. This is what happens when you push your luck. Karen, face contorted with rage, spat out words laced with ugly hatred. You lying thug! She tried to break free from Miller's hold, her body contorting in an unhinged attempt at freedom. Jamarcus stayed motionless. He expected her outburst. Officer Miller tightened his grip. Are you out of your mind? That's enough. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline. You think you can do this to me? I'm a white woman. No one is going to believe him over me. As if it couldn't get any worse, Karen turned toward Officer Jordan. eyes blazing with the kind of fury that defied logic, and spat directly in his face. A stunned silence fell over the room. Even Officer Miller, who had been grappling with Karen, went rigid with shock. Jamarcus felt his stomach churn in disgust. Officer Jordan calmly wiped his face, anger simmering in his eyes. He'd faced racism before, but this crossed a line most wouldn't dare. With a steady hand, he reached for his cuffs. "Karen Whitmore," Jordan said, voice cold. "You're under arrest for assaulting an officer, cybercrimes, and fraud." Karen's eyes flooded with panic. "No, no! You can't arrest me. I'm the victim." Her shriek grew piercing as she kicked at the air, fighting the inevitable. But the officers expertly maneuvered her out the door. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peeked from windows or gathered on lawns, phones out, filming every second. "Get your hands off me!" Karen wailed, her voice echoing across the street as they escorted her to the patrol car. "He's the criminal. I was only—" Her sputtering was cut off as Officer Jordan closed the car door. Officer Miller shook his head. "She never knew when to quit, did she?" Jamarcus gave a half smile. "Apparently not." Jordan exhaled, turning to Jamarcus. "You kept your cool a lot better than some people would have in your position." Jamarcus shrugged. "I believed karma would handle it eventually." Jordan cracked a small smile. "Seems like karma had a little help today." And karma didn't waste any time. By the following morning, Karen Whitmore's name was splashed across local and national news outlets. The footage captured by vigilant neighbors went viral in hours. Her shrieking meltdown, her racist outbursts, and her assault on a police officer were plastered everywhere. It didn't stop there. Her HOA held an emergency session, swiftly banning her from the community. Her once prized home turned into a financial albatross. No one wanted to help her, and her legal fees soared. Foreclosure became inevitable. Overnight, Karen transformed from an arrogant neighborhood tyrant into a nationwide laughingstock. Meanwhile, Jamarcus finally got what he'd wanted from the start: a little peace. He sat on his porch one evening, sipping coffee, while enjoying the strong, uninterrupted Wi-Fi signal. No more mooching neighbors, no more early morning rants on his doorstep. His phone buzzed with a text from a close friend. "Dude, you're a legend. She really thought she could pull that off in broad daylight." Jamarcus snorted softly, setting his mug down. "She was sure she could do no wrong," he murmured under his breath. Guess life proved otherwise. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a gentle purple, and Jamarcus took a moment to appreciate the stillness that he had fought to protect. Justice had been served, and for the first time in a long while, he felt that everything was exactly as it should be.